Greetings from the People's Republic of Berkeley, California, and welcome to the Fenton Forecast, where we are talking about our choice of futures, and we like to interview people who are making and creating the future. And I'm sitting next to one of them. Michael Greenberg is a really important young activist who started a group called Climate Defiance. Climate Defiance. And if you're not following them online, you should. A lot of people are. They're getting many hundreds of thousands of views. Climate Defiance is in the great tradition of nonviolent civil disobedience, which has been absolutely vital to the success of pretty much all social movements. You know, I remember the sit-ins in the civil rights movement and burning our draft cards to oppose the war in Vietnam. And of course, what Martin Luther King and Gandhi did. So in our attention economy, if you don't commit some outrageous actions and stir the pot, you don't get attention. And Michael and his group of young, very dedicated activists are masters of this. And I am very pleased to welcome Michael to the Fenton Forecast today. Glad you could be here in Berkeley. So, Michael, tell me, what made you start Climate Defiance?
I started Climate Defiance because we need something more. We're done with coalition letters. We're done with online petitions. You know, the time has come and gone to do a beach cleanup and say, okay, that's enough. The fossil fuel CEOs are right now incinerating our planet for profit, and calling your lawmaker is just not enough. The phone calls go to voicemail, the emails go to spam. We need disruptive direct action that really breaks through and shakes people awake. So,
Disruptive, not destructive, right?
Disruptive.
Right.
It is constructive, not destructive.
And so was this born out of frustration in part with some of our well-intentioned friends in the environmental groups that you felt something was missing?
Yes, too many of the existing groups don't want to make too many waves, don't want to ruffle too many feathers. They're too comfortable. They want to go along to get along. In many cases, their funders actually, for a lot of the big groups, their funders forbid them from engaging in direct action. In other cases, their lawyers tell them not to do it, and they say, okay. So we need to do something more because this is an existential crisis, and we need to act like it.
Yeah, and really, it is the main crisis facing humanity. A lot of young people know that, but not everybody does yet. You know, to put Michael's work in context, this appears like a crazy radical statement, what I'm about to make, but this is the objective truth of the situation we are in. There are a very small group of mostly men at these fossil fuel companies, and they're bankers and they're bought off corrupt politicians, and they are determined to make every last penny off every last drop of oil, coal, and gas on this planet, while knowing, they've known for 50 years, that this is going to destroy the economy, cause untold human suffering, and make an unlivable planet for civilization. They know what they're doing, these greedy people. And so being complacent and quiet about it is certainly not appropriate. They need to be stopped. I would say, would you agree with this, Michael, that in terms of the scale of their crime against humanity, the impact that they're going to have on people and generations to come, they're the biggest criminals who ever lived?
Yes. The entry-level fossil fuel workers should have a green transition and job training. The fossil fuel executives should have a trial in The Hague.
Yeah, I like Jane Fonda's suggestion. She spoke with me at South by Southwest in Texas, and she said, ladies, it's time to stop sleeping with the fossil fuel executives. You can sleep with the workers, but no more with the executives. I'm making light of a horrible situation. And of course, Michael, your actions include humor, which is part of why you're spreading so quickly and opening all these chapters and doing all this great work. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about some of the actions that you think most define climate defiance and what you think they've accomplished. Give us a few.
Absolutely. And by the way, that's a fascinating idea that Jane Fonda had. Maybe that will be our next organizing drive.
Hey, great.
Who knows? But yes, let me tell you about some of the successes we've had. So we started off 3 years ago with a very disruptive blockade of the White House Correspondents' dinner. It was actually the second most disruptive thing that's ever happened at that event. We got tremendous attention from that. I heard that senior officials in the Biden administration were actually calling up the big greens and telling them to get this protest called off.
You mean the big green organizations?
Yes.
Right.
The White House was calling the major environmental groups saying, stop this protest. They said, we can't. We don't know how. And so, yeah, we blockaded the White House Correspondents' dinner. I was like chest to chest for 20 seconds with White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain as he tried to push through the blockade, wade through the sea of bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very disruptive and it got a lot of attention. And actually, a few months after that, the White House announced they would be protecting millions of acres in Alaska from drilling. And actually, the New York Times article about it said that the president was personally stung by the outcry from young environmentalists.
The so-called Willow Project.
In the wake of Willow, which happened right before the protest. And so, right, Willow was a big loss. It's 200,000 barrels a day that will be transported through Alaska. But the protests that we and other groups did in the wake of Willow laid the groundwork for millions of acres in Alaska to be protected. And it's a sign of how we need more chapters, more volunteers, more disruptions, more direct actions. We've made a lot of impact, but it's just a drop in the bucket compared to what we need to do to take down this multi-trillion-dollar industry that is ready and willing to incinerate humanity for short-term profit.
So what are some other actions that would give the audience a flavor of what you've been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. I can talk about what happened at the state level in my home state of Maryland, what we did. So Governor Wes Moore had vetoed the most significant climate bill to pass in the state legislature. And so here's what happened. We found the governor's fundraiser. It was an intimate breakfast fundraiser, no more than a dozen people, at the kitchen table of an Exxon lobbyist. You can't make this up. So we found the breakfast. It was an intimate Capitol Hill townhouse. We marched in. We completely messed up the whole event, posted it online. It got millions of views. People were literally stopping me in my neighborhood bagel shop saying, oh, I saw you with Wes Moore. And, we showed that it was absolutely unacceptable that he vetoed this climate bill. Okay, a couple weeks later, we followed it up by confronting the state Senate president, Bill Ferguson. It was a $2,500 per plate steakhouse dinner. I clinked a glass with a spoon and did a satirical toast. I said, I'd like to make a toast to the Chuck Schumer of Maryland. Mm-hmm. All his biggest donors were cracking up, laughing at him. Sure enough, just a few days after that, the state Senate took the extraordinary step of overriding Wes Moore's veto. It's very unusual for, a body from the same party to override their own governor's veto. A Democratic state Senate overriding a Democratic governor, but they did. And the bill is now going to go into law. And we still need to do a lot more in Maryland because that's only the beginning. But yeah, it shows that this works and it confirms what I believe, which is that disruptive direct action creates the biggest impact you can make per dollar spent and per hour spent on the activism.
And tell us about New York. So New York passed perhaps the most ambitious climate bill in the nation, right?
Mhm.
I think California and New York pretty neck and neck on that, although California is further ahead, of course. Where we are right now, by the way, here in Berkeley in this house, we are 100% powered by the sun and batteries. My electric bill is zero. And the great thing about solar power, many good things about it, it doesn't heat the planet, it doesn't cause asthma, and the price can never go up. Pacific Gas and Electric, our utility, has been raising all these prices here, but my price can't go up. In fact, it's zero. I pay nothing. Net zero, because we sell solar power back to the grid. And I also charge my electric car with the solar panels on my roof, right? So I drive around on free, clean energy. And this is what's going to happen everywhere over time. I'm very optimistic about it. So New York passes this law. And as I understand it, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, is talking about repealing it. Is that right?
And she's not just talking about repealing it, she's actively trying to repeal it. And here's the really treacherous part. She knows she doesn't have the votes in the Democratic State Senate and Democratic State House in New York. So she is inserting it into must-pass legislation, into the budget bill. She's using the New York State budget bill as a Trojan horse to ram through her climate-killing agenda. So let me share some details about all this. Hey, everyone watching this. So here's what's happening in New York. In 2019, they passed the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It mandates that the state source 70% of its electricity from renewables this decade. Now, here's what's happening. For the past couple of years, Kathy Hochul has been failing to enforce the bill. So by the way, don't talk to us about, oh, why do you break the law? She's the one breaking the law.
Good point.
Yes, thank you. I agree. So the past couple of years, she was refusing to enforce the law. Then a bunch of environmental groups sued. She lost in court because she was in the wrong and she was not following the law. Now she is trying to repeal the law, and one question on it is blaming the environmental movement for suing her and saying that by suing her, the movement gave her no choice but to try to repeal the law. I think this might be textbook abuser behavior, blaming the victim.
Right.
So right now she's trying to repeal the law. She's blaming the oil crisis in Iran, the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, for, she's saying that that's her excuse for why she needs to do this. That is insane.
Right.
The fact that oil is now spiking to what, $100 some per barrel today, $4.30 per gallon today.
Back east,
yeah,
it's almost $6 in California.
Yes, that's why we need to transition off of fossil fuels faster. I'm not the lazy one here.
The logic is that by switching to the more expensive fuels, she's going to save consumers money. That's pretty logical.
She's dumb. I'll be the first to say she's not some evil genius. She's a blundering buffoon who is totally out of her depths. She was a one-term elected congresswoman from Buffalo, became lieutenant governor sort of randomly, then became governor. She only got the governorship because Andrew Cuomo resigned in disgrace. Right. She only won re-election in 2022 in deep blue New York by 4 or 5 percentage points, less of a margin than the governors in swing states. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin won their re-elections in that very same year. So she is not some mastermind playing 4D chess. She's being influenced by $17 million in fossil fuel spending in her state, basically just listening to whoever has the most money. She's totally out of her depths. Let me tell another story. I know
What are you going to do about
it? Yes, let me tell you what we're going to do about it.
People are rooting for you, Michael.
Yes, let me tell you what we're going to do about it. We are converging in Albany this Tuesday. I hope the podcast makes it out before
It'll come
Tuesday.
out after that. So we're talking here in early May. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. I will say by the time you see this, will have done a disruptive direct action in her office. We already did one a week ago, April 21st.
And what happened?
18 of us faced arrest. Here's how we know it was having an impact.
What did you do?
Yes, we sat in front of her office, right in front of her office. Here's how we know it was making an impact. Usually the protesters doing actions like that get a extremely low-level charge.
You're arrested and charged, but it's a low-level charge.
Yes, trespassing or disorderly conduct.
Right.
When we came, she applied trumped-up charges, so to speak, which carried a maximum prison sentence of up to a year. Thankfully, the judges knew that it was BS and they're not going to do that. And we believe that those charges did not come from the cops. In fact, the cop who was processing me was very confused about the charge. He was like, wait, you're getting what? I need to speak to my manager. This is confusing. Wait, let me keep going. Here's how we know it's working. We did it on April 21st. Then she spent birthday, April 22nd, writing an op-ed about why she's doing it. We know that she'd much prefer to have done it in the dead of night, but we upped the pressure and she got on the defensive. So now we're going back again. This is all happening very fast. The budget deal is racing to completion. So we are telling everyone, drop everything, come to Albany right now, take off of work, take off of school, whatever, just book your tickets, come to Albany. We need to mobilize right now to stop this scorched earth campaign against this bill. By the way, may I say one more thing?
Please.
One of the most common questions I've received since starting Climate Defiance is, but why do you go target Democrats?
Right.
And here we are, a Democratic governor with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic state house in a Democratic state that has not voted for a Republican for president since Reagan is trying to roll back a climate law in 2026. And you're asking me, why do you target Democrats? I can't. Thank you. Next.
Well,
I rest my case.
As you put it, you're targeting climate criminals.
Yes.
Regardless of party affiliation. And if they have that in common, then I think we're cheering you on. People that are going to make the earth unlivable by their corrupt actions should be targeted no matter what party they're with. That seems pretty logical to me.
Yes.
This isn't about party. This is about survival of our civilization. That's literally what it's about. So Michael, some of your actions have been very funny. And your very dedicated staff has gone into some of these places and mocked these people and told all kinds of jokes and pretended to be their big donors. So tell us a little bit about the role of humor in your direct and theatrical actions.
Absolutely. Well,
give us some examples.
I will. Yes, humor has a couple impacts. So, right. One, it can help with changing minds because it helps lower people's guard. You know, a funny joke is a funny joke, and you might reach some people who laugh and then say, good point. The other thing that's good about humor is that it helps us reach people on social media, which is how we get the word out. You know, we've probably been in the New York Times about 5 times by now. I have yet to meet somebody who tells me that they've heard about Climate Defiance because of the New York Times. You know, the way that people
Except
say,
for me.
we knew each other before I started the career. But yeah, the way we reach people is through social media, and humor helps us do that. So to give some examples, yes, there was a cancer gala honoring Trump's EPA chief, Zeldin. Would you believe it?
I mean, like a cancer society kind of thing.
Yeah, although one could wonder if they're pro-cancer after
Yeah,
that.
well, Lee Zeldin's definitely spreading more cancer as he allows more toxic chemicals into the environment. So yeah, so he was getting an award from a cancer society, and what did you do?
Yeah, we bought tickets, and then we, in this, 200-person ballroom, everybody's dressed their finest. We clinked a glass and made a toast and said, we'd like to thank Lee Zeldin for helping to spread cancer. And yeah, that reached millions of people. And, sure, the fossil fuel industry and MAGA has, the hundreds of millions of dollars for ads and misinformation. But this actually, reaches people in a real way, in a way that is organic, literally and
You're
figuratively.
not paying for this attention.
Yeah.
And how much attention are you getting? How many people watch your videos online?
Yeah. The past month, it's been about 5 million. On a really high month, it's about 20 million,
Mhm.
all organic. And yeah, for many people, the only climate content they see is climate defiance. They don't see the reports from the IPCC.
Right.
They don't see the, 2050 predictions from the International Energy Agency. They see climate defiance on their iPhones.
And they don't see much. The Yale studies show that only 12% of the American people see anything about climate change online. So what you're doing is breaking climate hushing and climate silence. And in our attention economy, this is the way to do it. So speaking of humor, I understand that a movie is coming out about climate defiance that the great and very funny director Adam McKay is helping with. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. So Adam McKay recently signed on as executive producer. The movie is called Just Look Up, in reference to the smash Hollywood hit Don't Look Up.
That Adam made.
Yes, which Adam made. In Don't Look Up, spoiler alert, humanity dies from a meteor, which is an allegory for climate change. In that movie, humanity has the solutions, but there just isn't the political will. So everybody dies. In Just Look Up, we are taking our future back into our own hands. We're saying, we're not going like sheep to the slaughter. So yeah, the filmmakers, they followed us for a year.
So they've gone to all your actions and watched all your meetings and all of this.
And not just that. Yeah, actions, meetings. They also came to, my family vacations. They came to Passover with my family. They came to my comedy shows. They,
Oh yeah, Climate Defiance does comedy shows. That's
Yeah.
I haven't gone to them yet. I need to.
Oh, you should. Yeah, it's a good time. Yeah, we actually had Hannah Einbinder headline just a few days
Tell
ago.
people who she is. Not everybody will know.
Yeah, she's the lead in the show Hacks, and she's a progressive, queer, Jewish comedian and actor who's really taking off. And so yeah, the fact that people like Hannah are willing to associate with us shows that we're building real political power, and it's working.
And a lot of prominent people have been associating with you, which is very heartening to me because we're in this era where some people are quite chicken shit and afraid, especially with Trump's retaliation against people, et cetera. And it's always dangerous in fascist times if people bend the knee, the bullies just bully more. So let's see, you've had help from a number of people in Hollywood, right? Susan Sarandon has helped you. The heir to Disney, Abigail Disney, who's also a filmmaker, has helped you. I believe Mark Ruffalo has helped you some. Is that right?
He's reposted a lot of our stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And in politicians, there's quite a few members of Congress that have appeared at your events. Is that right? Tell us about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Happy to name drop a little bit. Right. So some of the members of Congress that have come out, to Climate Defiance fundraisers include, squad members like Rashida Tlaib and Summer Lee and Ayanna Pressley. And then also some who are more mainstream, like Jamie Raskin and Ro Khanna. And so it's an indication of the power we're building. Last week in LA, the frontrunner for mayor, Nitya Raman, came to our Earth Month event. Last year for Earth Month, Zoran Mamdani came to our Earth Month benefit dinner. And yeah, right here in the Bay in San Francisco, all three candidates who are running to replace Pelosi came out to our fundraiser. Shorkat Chakrabarti, Connie Chan, and Scott Wiener.
So I think that's a great sign that you can do responsible, nonviolent civil disobedience with a twinkle in your eye and get support. Now, of course, you're not in doing that. Let's be honest. You are taking enormous risks. The fossil fuel industry doesn't mess around. These guys from Texas, and so the risk of you facing more serious charges is strong. I believe the Justice Department has launched some kind of investigation of you. Is that right?
Let me talk about that. So, earlier this year, several people who are affiliated with Climate Defiance confronted Congressman Tom Suozzi at a public forum.
Who is he?
He is a pro-ICE conservative Democrat
From
Long Island.
Sure.
Yeah. So we confronted him at a public forum. The forum happened to be at a synagogue, but the event was not a specifically religious event or religious ceremony.
And it wasn't on a religious holiday either, right?
Yeah, it was a random weekday.
It was like in a synagogue, like an auditorium.
Yeah, pretty much. And so then, the DOJ tweeted that they would investigate. However, what's clear is that they have no grounds to stand on, because if you look at the actual law, I literally read the statutes. If you look at the law is against interfering with people's right to worship. There was no worship going on. There was just a speech with questions. So yeah, it's just bluster and posturing.
This is what they went after the former CNN journalist Don Lemon on in another town, that he was interfering in worship by being a journalist. And so is that investigation still underway? Have they subpoenaed you? Can you say anything more about it or not?
So they surely realize they have no grounds to stand on. So I don't think they will do anything further. Yeah. I mean, it's not like you get an email and they say the investigation is now closed. But yeah, I think they know they have no grounds to stand on.
So Michael, tell me how you deal with this personally. Let's not downplay the risks. Anyone that gets involved in challenging the power structure, especially through nonviolent direct action, is taking a risk that you could be arrested, that violence could be directed against you, as has happened, to everybody going back to Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And, the civil rights demonstrators, I used to photograph riots and demonstrations in the 60s. I had to have a helmet and a gas mask with me. The police used to come after me, just because I had long hair. So how do you deal emotionally and personally with this risk? You've decided to take it, but what was your thinking process in looking at that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if I have all the answers. I think part of it is I try to enjoy life, take care of myself, make time for a community, family, friends. A friend gave me a surfing lesson this morning. It was my first time trying to surf.
How did it go?
Oh, went well. I tried standing up on the surfboard. I did not manage to.
Michael, you're how old?
32.
Oh, wow. You're a little late to start surfing.
Yeah, apparently it's a lot easier if you start before the age of 10, before you have this kind of fear of falling. Yeah.
So you take care of yourself. What else?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have all the answers. I guess just, I work very hard, but I also make time for for fun. And yeah, I'm cautious. I mean, I proceed with the right level of caution. There's some people who are so cautious that they're paralyzed. On the other hand, we try to act in a way that doesn't put us in legal jeopardy. And
or excessive legal jeopardy. With this administration, I mean, they go after FBI directors and, and indict journalists. So, you can expect challenges, of course, because you're challenging the people who are really in charge. Trump's just a puppet of these companies and these billionaires, and that's just a literal fact. So, Michael, what in your background, in your family, in your history, led you to decide that you were going to be a militant activist?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing I think about sometimes is, right, so I'm Jewish, of course, and yeah, we Jews are a very resilient people. We have had many enemies and persecutors over the millennia, and we know how to protect ourselves and persevere. And so, when I think about, our enemies now, the authoritarians, the billionaires, the lobbyists, the fossil fuel executives, I think of, my own people and the resilience we've shown over the millennia. And I try to challenge, to channel that, I should say.
And are your parents activists?
My mom is a very passionate activist who's been active in, almost every cause there is. And yeah, the spirit of activism, I think, definitely is something that I inherited from her.
What about your grandparents?
They let's see, my grandpa was ahead of his time. He actually worked in real estate. He was a landlord. Don't cancel me. And he was very progressive for his time, and he really went to great lengths to make sure that all tenants, regardless of race, were treated equally, and that he could create good living conditions for all of his tenants. He had this motto, treat the tenant as a customer. And yeah, actually, so he lived in Baltimore City, and at a time when pretty much most of the white people were exiting Baltimore for the suburbs, he made a point of actually staying in the city until my mom graduated from high school, because he wanted her to grow up with a diverse group of friends and a diverse school.
Yeah, that's the best of the progressive Jewish tradition, isn't it? Yeah. Well, so great. Sorry, I know you don't normally talk about those personal stuff, so thank you. But I think the audience is interested, you're dedicating yourself to this on behalf of everyone. How did it happen? So Climate Defiance is a very lean organization. You have a very small budget. You have about 10, 12 people working for you, something like that. And everybody gets paid about the same. Can you tell people what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a pretty flat pay structure. The vast majority of people earn $65K. That's the median salary and the mode, and that's what I take myself. And then for people who are like right out of college, we pay a little bit less, and for people who are extremely senior, we pay just a little bit more. But yeah, the vast majority of us get the same salary. And yeah, we really maximize every dollar, right? So we, stay on people's couches and in people's guest rooms. We take megabuses and Greyhounds rather than trains. And, a lot of the work is actually done by volunteers. So that really, makes every dollar go farther.
And you have how many chapters around the country now?
Yeah, depending on how you count. Yeah, I'd say we have 5 that are quite active and another 5 that are just getting started. And yeah, we want to grow even more. For example, Salt Lake City, the lake is drying up and arsenic from the lake is getting released into the air.
Gas, yeah.
Yeah, we should have a chapter there. We should have a chapter in Miami where they're going underwater. We should have a chapter in Phoenix. I think we're just about to start one.
Where you get degree burns from the sidewalk in the summer.
Yeah, they just hit 100 degrees 100 days in a row. Yeah.
And so there the idea would be is that groups engage in local action against local politicians or congressmen, or what are give me an example of a couple of things the chapters have done.
Right, absolutely. So for example, Colorado is one of our.
Oh, I saw you just confronted Governor Polis.
Oh, I haven't even watched that one yet,
it,
actually.
yeah.
Wow, yeah.
He was pretty flustered.
Oh, yes, wow.
Because he's allowing the expansion of fracking in Colorado.
Yes. Oh, wow. I haven't even had a chance to watch that one yet.
That's a sign of a good leader, Michael, that you don't know everything that's going on.
That's... Thank you. Right. As the team has grown, right, I'm learning how to delegate more, micromanage less, and try to, trust people with, leading on what their job description.
Okay, so tell us about a local action you do know about.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, let's talk about let's see. I'm thinking out loud. Oh yeah, we had a good one recently in Minnesota where we have a strong chapter. So remember that Doomsday a couple weeks ago, Trump said, a entire civilization will die tonight at 8 p.m. So that day, the day that the Doomsday clock was ticking down, it was set to tick down to 0 at 8 p.m. At about 6 p.m., 2 hours before potential World War III, Amy Klobuchar,
the senator from
Minnesota, was having a fancy fundraiser for herself at a beautiful multi-million-dollar lakeside mansion on an evening where she should have been, working the phones, making backroom deals, calling people, trying to call off this nuclear war. She's a senator. She has power. She has connections. I think she was or is on the Foreign Relations Committee. While she should have been doing that, she was mixing and mingling with a room full of multimillionaires raising money for her campaign. So what did we do? We barged in and we confronted her. And
this was not a climate action.
It was both. It was both, right? On one hand, we said, why are you talking to multimillionaires in a multi-million-dollar mansion when we are hours away from World War III? And we also said, why did you support the Line 3 pipeline? Why do you support extractive activities in the boundary waters? Why do you support ethanol, which is worse than gasoline?
and the pipeline threatens pristine environments in Minnesota, and the boundary waters, which is iconic in Minnesota. Really, the Senator Klobuchar is going to allow the desecration of the boundary waters. That's really happening. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, in many ways, she's been neutral on mining. I believe it's nickel or copper, I forget, in the boundary waters in her own home state. Never mind that it's one of the most visited wilderness areas.
Yeah, I believe in the world. Yeah.
I believe millions.
So this is why you go after Democrats, because Democrats can be corrupt and they can be complicated and have good qualities and corrupt evil qualities, and they have to be called out. But you've gone after plenty of Republicans. I saw you disrupted a speech by Rahm Emanuel, the former congressman who was also Obama's chief of staff and is for some reason seems deluded into thinking he can be president. And so I saw your people stood up at an award ceremony for him, or a speech. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rahm Emanuel is a climate villain. When he was White House chief of staff, he told Obama not to pursue climate too much because who knows, like I don't know.
Because it
didn't
wasn't a
poll
top
well.
voting issue, right?
Something like that. And so, sure enough, Obama didn't invest almost any political capital in addressing climate change. And here's what the result was. The House of Representatives did pass a climate bill, but it went on to die in the Senate because Obama wasn't willing to use his bully pulpit and do the arm twisting necessary. Then Rahm Emanuel was ambassador to Japan, and he actively pushed for the US to build fracked gas export facilities from the US to Japan. Let me tell you how bad that is. Fracked gas is 80 times worse.
I mean, liquefied natural gas, right?
Yeah, or
LNG.
Yeah. In this case, it's liquefied, right? It is 80 times worse than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas when it leaks.
Yeah.
And it does leak. And when you are shipping it across the Pacific Ocean, you're creating a ton of opportunity for it to leak.
Right.
So Rahm Emanuel actively pushed as ambassador for export facilities from the US to Japan. So this man cannot be allowed anywhere near the presidency. So what did we do? He was giving a speech, and we profoundly disrupted the whole speech to expose his climate record.
Yeah. People don't understand a lot about this, but it's true. Liquefying natural gas takes enormous amounts of energy. So not only does it destroy the climate, because methane is, as you said, 80 times more to 100 more times more powerful molecule for molecule than carbon dioxide in trapping heat on Earth. But when you use more energy to liquefy it, you're causing even more pollution and more global warming. So it's a disaster. And it amazes me, just in my own little way, I still try to be an activist. And just 2 days ago, the New York Times runs a business page story about the growth in liquid LNG gas exports abroad and how important it is to the world economy. And not once does this report mention that if we keep burning this stuff, we will overheat the planet, raise the price of food, collapse insurance markets, put the world's coastal cities underwater. Those are all facts, folks. I'm not exaggerating. Not a mention. The readers don't need to know that. All they need to know is that it's good for making money in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I believe a couple years ago, to your point about the media, right, there had just been a major study, I believe, by the IPCC saying that, we are on track to create an unlivable planet. What does the New York Times do? They have a tiny box at the bottom of the front page that says, Earth on track to be unlivable, scientists find. Story page A14.
Well, to their credit, and I followed just
to their credit, they had it on A14.
No, they've done a lot of good climate journalism, and they've had other stories very prominent, but it's not consistent. You're certainly right. And I think it's indicative of a problem we have, which is that elites in this country have not fully internalized how much of an emergency we're actually in. We have so little time to prevent the climate from tipping over into really dangerous situations. And yet, this is the emergency that isn't. You wouldn't know it. And, one little personal beef of mine, and I've read the New York Times pretty much every day since I was 15 years old, and I'm 74. So imagine the editorial page of the New York Times has yet to run one editorial decrying Trump's attack on our climate. Trump's going to put New York underwater, and you wouldn't know it reading the editorial page of the New York Times. And worse, the official position and many of the articles on the editorial and opinion page urge Democrats to adopt more moderate positions like supporting more fossil fuel burning. What is moderate about supporting the destruction of a livable planet? I'd like to know. It's crazy, but see, this hasn't seeped in. People in much of the media don't want to cover it, don't want to think about it. They don't think the audience is interested. So, guys, if you can't make the most important story threatening humanity interesting, maybe you should hire some different people. How's that?
Yes, you're right. And Yes, let's keep talking about the media. Right. The Washington Post editorial board endorsed for confirmation Trump EPA chief Lee Zeldin, who is actively destroying the federal government's ability to address climate change and who is a climate denier who speaks at climate denial conferences. They endorsed Interior Secretary Doug Burgum for confirmation, even though he's opening up public lands to drilling and canceling offshore wind projects. And they endorsed Energy Secretary Chris Wright,
a fracking executive
who just bribed Total Energy with a $1 billion taxpayer-funded bribe in exchange for them canceling a wind farm and investing in gas instead. That's who the Washington Post is endorsing for confirmation.
Yeah, and this is from Jeff Bezos, who pledged $10 billion to a climate fund and was doing a lot of good work in this regard until Trump took office and he started bending the knee. I will say, to be fair, the news section of the Washington Post remains quite great on climate, although they did just reduce the size of their climate desk quite a lot. So, there are still contradictions in these things and in capitalism, and we need to be fair, but ultimately and overall, the media is not helping people understand the emergency we're in. The TV media is even worse. You could have 10 hurricanes in a row, and they'll never tell you that burning fossil fuels is making the weather more extreme. They just won't say it. Media Matters covers this and measures the television coverage on climate change. And they keep finding that it gets worse every year. It's like 8% of the weather stories, they'll even mention the word climate change. And by the way, ABC News is the worst. And Bob Iger of Disney, you own ABC. I'm talking to you. You need to do something about this. Your network is not informing the public about the greatest crisis of our time. Shame on you. Please do something about it. You own it. Okay, how's that?
Good. I agree.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. The emergency people don't talk about it, but when you do these disruptive actions, it forces people to talk about it. It breaks through the complacency. And this is why I think what you're doing is just so very important. Are there other groups engaged in this kind of work here or around the world?
Sure, yes. And to your first point, this causes people to talk about it. Right. We once had a very disruptive action. There was, a moderate person in our online comments saying, how does this add to the discourse? And it's like, well, you're talking about it. There are a few other groups that do disruptive direct actions on climate, such as Extinction Rebellion, Sunrise, and Planet Over Profit. However, the truth is we need a lot more. We need a movement of movements. So what we don't need is gatekeeping. We don't need people to get permission before doing stuff. We just need people rising up and taking initiative. In the words of Bill McKibben, we don't need a leaderless movement. We need a leaderful movement.
Oh, that's a great phrase. And again, I want to stress, these actions are all 100% nonviolent in the great tradition of nonviolent civil disobedience and direct action. My mentor, most young people don't know who he was Abbie Hoffman. And Abbie Hoffman was a great agitprop, theatrical, hysterically funny activist and agitator in the 60s, starting in the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, and he got very involved in the counterculture. And you might know Abbie's character from the Netflix movie, The Trial of the Chicago 7, where Sacha Baron Cohen played Abbie and got him really very well. So Abbie comes from this same tradition of civil disobedience and direct action with humor. Abbie used to wear an American flag shirt when it was illegal. It was literally illegal. And he was arrested multiple times just for wearing a goddamn shirt. And one time he went on the biggest talk show in America. This is before Oprah. I think it was Merv Griffin or something like that. And he was wearing his American flag shirt. So the producer of the broadcast cut out half the screen. You could only see the host. You couldn't see Abbie. You could only hear him. And that producer was Roger Ailes, who went on to really screw up America by starting Fox News. And, Abbie used to do stuff that was so much fun. Like in 1967, I think it was, he said, we're all going to go to Washington to protest the Vietnam War by levitating the Pentagon. We're going to levitate the Pentagon. And something like 50,000 people showed up and levitated the Pentagon.
Oh, yes, right. I know he also famously said that he would put, was it LSD? Or
he used to give press conferences threatening to put LSD in the water supply. And, it would scare the police, and it was ridiculous. It was just a joke because it'd be way too dilute. It wouldn't affect anything. Now that you mention it, I'm trying to get a documentary film made about Abbie because I think he's so inspirational for young people that you can change the world and have fun. He had a lot of fun, and we all had a lot of fun with him. For example, one day he went to the visitors gallery above the New York Stock Exchange. And he proceeded to throw dollar bills, hundreds of dollar bills, onto the trading floor. And all trading on the New York Stock Exchange immediately stopped while the traders dove for the dollar bills on the floor. And so he made his comment about capitalism. And by the way, today when you go there, there's now a glass wall in the visitors gallery. You cannot do it. I used to urge a client of mine when I ran my PR firm to go rain $100 bills down on the House of Representatives from the visitors gallery. And I bet the same thing would have happened.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Yes.
You have to keep a sense of humor to keep going against this evil. And I think that, love and humor does eventually often defeat evil. It's like Marvin Gaye said, only love can conquer hate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Michael, how can people help Climate Defiance? And what would you like them to do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can sign up on our website, climatedefiance.org, and then we'll reach out about various opportunities. And you can donate also at climatedefiance.org. Yeah, we're not funded by billionaires. We're not funded by the Wall Street elite. We're funded by regular people. We both had dinner last night with a teacher who said he gives away total $6,000 a year from his teaching salary. And he said he's going to give it all to Climate Defiance. Every charitable dollar that he gives will go to us because, he sees that this is working. It's breaking through. It's reaching people. It's moving people in power. So, so please go to our website, sign up, donate, follow us on social media. It all makes a difference.
And on social media, are you just Climate Defiance?
Yep.
Not Climate Defiance 1 or anything like that? Just Climate Defiance.
Just Climate Defiance. We got it early.
No, that's good. And do you want people to come forward who want to start local chapters?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And how should they do that?
Yeah, we have an email address, info@climatedefiance.org. Email us. We'll help you start a chapter in your community. That way you can target your congressman, your state senator, your city council member, or your local CEO.
Your Public Utility Commission.
Yes. There are many climate criminals on various PUCs. I believe right here in California, they reduced the amount that homeowners receive for putting solar on their houses. They reduced the amount that you get paid per kilowatt for selling excess solar back to the grid.
Yeah. I think they overdid it. I have solar here. I get paid for selling it to the utility. And I think the argument that people that benefit from having a grid connection should pay something for it, some modest amount, is fair. Otherwise you're displacing costs onto other people. But they way overdid it. It was really kind of shocking. Of course, California is making enormous progress. There are many days out here now that the grid is 50, 60% renewable energy.
Hmm.
The battery storage here has gotten huge. So now, at night, instead of putting on gas peakers, we're drawing down from batteries. My, excuse the expression, Tesla Powerwall is hooked up to a system where when the grid needs more power, it can tap it from my batteries to try to balance demand and supply, which is great. And I get paid a little bit for it. By the way, I have a Tesla car. It's 6 years old, and I put a sticker on it. And the sticker says, Vintage Tesla, Pre-Madness Edition. Because that guy, it's really too bad what happened to him. He started out great, and now he's turned into a horrible racist. It's just horrible. Horrible.
Yeah.
But he started out great, and thank God for his cars. You have to give him that, but not much else anymore.
Yeah.
So, okay, Michael, what closing words do you have for the people out there who want to try to save a livable Earth?
Yeah, a couple pieces of advice, right? One, do things with other people. Having a canvas tote bag or a reusable straw is fine and good, but you really need to work with other people, not to just change your light bulbs. Again, that's fine and good, but really to move the political system, whether that's your city, your county, your state, your country. The issue here is not a lack of solutions. It is a lack of political will.
Right.
It is a lack of political pressure. So get political and do things with other people. The last thing I will say, so many people don't know where to start. The problem is so big that it is overwhelming. So a very common question is, what can I do? And honestly, you just got to start somewhere. So maybe your state legislature is thinking of passing something good. Help push it through. Maybe they're trying to do something bad. Help stop it. There's no one thing that will solve everything. There's no one person that will solve everything. So just get started somewhere. Find your people, find your 2, 3, 4 collaborators, get started and see where it goes. You don't need to figure it all out before you start.
It's like the great anthropologist Margaret Mead used to say, it only takes a small group of people to change the world. And thank you, Michael, for your efforts to change the world and to keep our world around so that humanity can continue to hopefully evolve. Because I'm sure we will if we're here, and we won't if we're not. Okay,
Absolutely.
Thank you, Michael, for being our guest on the Fenton Forecast. As always, we welcome your comments and feedback. You can write to us at hello@fentonforecast.com, hello@fentonforecast.com. And if you want to write to Michael, send something to that email address, and I'll make sure it gets to him. Okay, thank you very much. So long, everybody.
Thank you.